You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 3rd of October 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme, Italy is on a general strike over the Gaza flotilla. Monocle's Ed Stalker has joined the strikes and lived to tell the tale to us right here on this show. After that, we'll hear from Carlotta Rebello about Portugal's new legislation tightening legal immigration to limiting it to the highly skilled. And then,
every day we have new and more important cyber attacks. Society will lose trust and confidence in cyber if we are not able to tackle that.
A former Supreme Allied Commander of Transformation at NATO sounds the warning to confront cyber attacks before it's too late. And finally, we'll hear about a lifeline for independent bookshops.
People thought we were slightly insane to try to compete with Amazon in selling books. But what we found with physical books, people are willing to pay that little bit more in the interest of supporting indie bookshops.
Bookshop.org is now letting independent bookstores sell ebooks on their platform. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. This is The Briefing, and we're going to start today's show in Italy, where a national general strike has engulfed the country. But one person helpfully not on strike is our very own Ed Stalker, Monocle's Europe editor-at-large, who joins us from Milan. Ed, before we get to you, you did join the strikes in some form this morning. Let's hear a little bit of what you heard. I mean, Ed, that sounds actually like quite a nice, joyful day out of the office, but I do understand it was a little more chaotic than that.
I got in trouble, actually, for crossing the line with my bicycle. Some people didn't like that, so that was one of the minor points.
Tackle you to the ground.
Friction.
What happened?
No, I did get beeped at but that van playing music, I suddenly realised I was sort of caught in the crowd and I needed to get across the other side, so I sort of asked and sprinted, but I did have a huge bike with a kid seat on the back. I didn't look very cool, but anyway, I got across.
Not with the kid in the seat.
Not with the kid. The kid had been safely dropped at school. But to be honest with you, yeah, Milan is kind of chaos right now, and I'm speaking from my home studio, and just down the road in Piazzale Sousa, loads of people were gathered just minutes before we came on air. Police cars blocking off streets to stop, the cars going down where the procession is. But it started this morning. Took my 5-year-old to school. His class was actually the only class in school that wasn't striking. So that was the only class that was open, which is quite a weird thing.
Like in the entire school. So there's just one class running in the school.
He's 5, so it's a small school, but literally it was the only class open. All the rest were dark and closed. So that was quite odd. And as we cycled along, we had to navigate block streets, and then a load of students appeared with one of them with a big flare in their hand. So that started off this morning, and then after I dropped him at school, I went to go and see the protest, which is where I sent that audio from. And yeah, just a lot of people gathering in Corso Buenos Aires, which is basically this main thoroughfare in Milan, which is full of shops, and it had all been cut off for these people to take to the street. A lot of Palestinian scarves, a lot of Palestinian flags, lots of, from the looks of it, young people, a lot of students taking to the street, some with megaphones saying "Free Palestine," lots with slogans saying "Hands off the flotilla," and marching. According to one estimate from the Italian General Confederation of Labour, that is the main trade union that has called for this strike, and it's been followed by other grassroots trade unions. There are 100,000 people in Milan who are taking part in these protests. And Chris, it's actually beyond your political beliefs and how you feel about all of this. It's kind of amazing for Milan, because I'd say that this wasn't true of Milan say in the 70s, or in the after war period, when there was a lot of political violence. And it's good that there is no violence anymore. But I feel that Milan has become a very non-political city in a way. There are other cities in Italy where demonstrations take place more, whereas I feel, this is the business hub, less of that stuff seems to happen here. So in my time that I've been in the city, I've never seen anything like this, the amount of people, demonstrations of this sort taking place. And this is the third day in a row that there have been this sort of thing in Milan, although this, of course, is the biggest. So what you're saying is this is bringing some excitement to the streets of Milan. Is that part of how you see it? Well, I'm just saying, I wouldn't say like it, you don't really see sort of politically active demonstrations that often. And if you do, they tend to be pretty small. So this is by far the biggest thing that I have personally witnessed in Milan. But of course, let's not forget, it's not just happening in Milan. According to estimates, around 60,000 people are in the streets of Rome, also other cities, Naples, Turin. So this is something happening around the country. Of course, it's causing a lot of disruption as well, delays to trains. Obviously, if you're a van driver in Milan today trying to get around the city, you are quite irate. I saw a few of them being quite annoyed as they got, told to go on a diversion by the local police today. But this stopping of the flotilla has made a lot of people angry. And, I said there were a lot of students, but also, I saw people of all ages today, to be honest with you, lots of families as well, waving their flags. People are angry. They want to show their voice. And it's not just an Italian phenomenon, of course. There was a big protest in Barcelona yesterday. This is something that we've seen and heard throughout Europe. Well, Ed, when it comes, though, to, if we can discuss the politics a little bit of this, it is obviously about Palestine, about Gaza, specifically about this flotilla with Italians aboard that was stopped by the Israelis. But the fact that there is a sort of strike and protests about this in Italy, I'm curious what protesters want. What sort of action? Is this just a general protest about Palestine, or do they actually want, say, Italy's Giorgia Meloni to actually do something about the flotilla? Yeah, I mean, they want the government to take a tougher stance on Israel, basically. They believe that the government should be speaking out more about what's happening. Now, Italy isn't one of the countries that has recognised the Palestine state. Italy has recognised, as plenty of nations have, what they call Italy's right to self-defence after the October attack last year by Hamas. What the foreign minister Tajani has said is that he's tried to separate Hamas from Gaza. That's as strong a wording as there has been so far. So they would like to see the Italian government, as I said, take a stronger position on what is happening there, and that doesn't show much sign of happening in the foreseeable future. And of course, Meloni, let's be honest, isn't a great fan of trade unions. So she's been a little disparaging, one might say, of what's happening today. She also made a comment saying, basically commenting on the fact that this national strike is taking place on a Friday, saying a long weekend and revolution don't go together. So I have to say, and I did love that comment in some way. I mean, it is disparaging, but at the same time, it's quite a good one to throw out there. I mean, to play devil's advocate, is there any truth at all to that? Could Italians just be happy to have a Friday off? No, I think that's a bit unfair. People care strongly. And I think also, beyond Gaza, there's a strong hint, and of course it's interlinked, of the influence from France, the Bloc en tout, the block everything movement. I've seen signs of, block everything written in Italian. I was in La Spiezia, which is in Liguria, yesterday, actually, and I saw a protest, a small one, through the streets of the centre of that town. And I saw there's actually a small encampment as well, and I saw that sign. So I think perhaps it also feeds into young people feeling fed up with this political class. And I guess if you like what's happening in Gaza and the government's failed to respond adequately in their eyes is kind of the incarnation of all the things they see wrong, you might say, with the system, Chris.
Ed Stalker, thanks very much for joining us from Milan. We should add, although we can't get into it right now, but the Italian lawmakers have actually approved now conditional recognition of Palestine in response to the protest. I'm sure we'll have more on these stories going forward. But now here's Laura Kramer with today's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. A Russian oil tanker linked to mysterious drone flights over Denmark has resumed its voyage after being detained by the French Navy. French authorities boarded the ship last weekend and briefly held its captain and first mate. Both are now back on board as the vessel heads towards the Suez Canal. Elsewhere, Munich Airport has reopened after drone sightings shut it down last night. 17 flights were cancelled and some 3,000 passengers were stranded, while others were diverted to nearby cities. German airline Lufthansa says flights are now running normally. And Japan is facing shortages of Asahi beer and tea after a cyber attack shut most of the company's factories. The attack crippled its order and delivery systems earlier this week. Major retailers warn shelves may soon be empty of Asahi products. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Laura, and we will have more on cyber attacks later in the show. But to Portugal now, where lawmakers this week passed a bill that toughens immigration laws. It follows a trend we're seeing in a number of countries around the world, really, kind of limiting immigration to the highly skilled, among other things, and to explain all of those other things as well. I'm joined now in the studio by Monocle's senior foreign correspondent, Carlotta Rebelo. Good afternoon, Carlotta.
Hi, Chris.
Now, you are here in your capacity as a Portuguese citizen, but that said, we do have to note that you have recently become a British citizen as well, thanks to your highly skilled contributions, I'm sure, to this country.
Oh, I'm sure if I had to apply for a highly skilled visa in this country, probably I could get one. Not so sure about Portugal, though, because it has been more difficult from now on. It is more difficult from now on to get a permit to live in the country. As you mentioned, this is the very controversial law on immigration, which back in July, so this is before the Parliament went on its summer recess, failed to pass. And it was sent to the Constitutional Tribunal, where it was said that some of the proposals were not in accordance to law. So this is the redrafted version, which we need to say only passed because the government caved in to the far right, because it needed the support of the far right to pass. And because of that, we see this as one of the toughest changes to the immigration law in recent memory. One of the main changes is how people can bring family members to Portugal. And this has to do with one of the main negotiating points, which was changing the requirements. If you were an immigrant living in Portugal, paying your taxes, living your life, you have the right to bring your family over, as anyone does, for example, right here in the UK. And they've changed that threshold, and they need to have not only valid residency, but also they need to earn a certain amount of money, and any benefits that might be earning do not count for that threshold, which before they did. One of the main reasons that the government says that this they wanted to change this was, again, to just limit people coming to Portugal as a way of bringing family into the European Union and using Portugal as a step point to get access to the wider EU.
Carlotta, as you say, this has been done with the support of the far right. This is something that is common in a lot of countries right now that are tightening laws on immigration, which does beg the question, I suppose, in Portugal, how popular is an approach like this? Is this something that the public really wanted to see?
It's tough to say, because I want to answer no, but the truth is that the far right is the second biggest party in the country. So numbers say that yes, because that's what people voted for. Now, when the law didn't pass the first time around, it obviously, as you can expect, it generated a huge debate in media, in newspapers about what this means. But then we saw over the summer such a ramping up of anti-immigration discourse. And this is in part tied to the fact that there's mayoral elections happening in the country in about 2 weeks from now. So campaign mode began, and of course anti-immigration sentiment is growing, and this is where this notion of a highly skilled visa comes into play, because essentially what the far right is saying is that they want to limit to immigrants who come to Portugal to do the jobs that no one else wants to do, and they want to attract people who bring money and investment instead. And this is because of the wave of anti-immigration sentiment that has been happening in the country. They also, the exceptions are not just on the family reunification requirements are not just for highly skilled visas, but also for the golden visas, which, Chris, you might remember we've spoken about several times on this show, quite controversial, which is the fact that you can acquire residency and eventually citizenship by basically buying a house of a certain value or investing a certain amount that generates a certain number of jobs. And again, the issue of being another step into the European Union. Now, what will be interesting to see is that the one thing that wasn't decided yet, that they're still working on, is the changes to the citizenship requirements. And there is talk that they want to introduce different tests, a requirement for Portuguese language. So we need to see how that negotiation continues. But if I may just add one thing to this immigration law change, for me, one of the biggest points is the fact that the citizens from the CPLP, this is the community of countries that speak Portuguese, so Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, etc., São Tomé and Príncipe, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, they used to have a special regime where the same way EU citizens in the UK have a special regime to acknowledge the shared history and the close relationship between nations. And they've removed that now. So now CPLP citizens who want to move to Portugal are under the same rules as everyone else. And this has not gone down well with a lot of people.
Carlotta, just finally, because you were just in Portugal yourself, I'm just curious kind of how you experienced being back there in this moment. Did you see any of the electioneering? What was the mood kind of like being back?
One thing that always surprises me when I'm back near election cycle is I forget how common it is in Portugal and widespread for us to have billboards everywhere for all the candidates, which
It's a very German thing.
Yes,
all the billboards.
All the billboards and the billboard competitions, that your billboard cannot be 1 centimeter higher than the one of the opposing party. But it did, not surprise me, but it was a reality check seeing some of the messaging in that billboard being in line with what we've been discussing, which is not something I remember from the last time I was there, or maybe if it was one or the other, whereas now is very much this idea of cleaning up the city, cleaning up the country, and I'm not talking about actual trash collection. So a type of language that I have not been used to seeing in Portugal, but it is how the debates are shaping up now.
It is a reality of campaigning these days. Carlotta Rebello, Monocle's senior foreign correspondent, thank you very much for joining us. This is The Briefing. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak. Now, the Global Cybersecurity Forum has just wrapped up in Riyadh, and one of the attendees of this year's edition was the former Supreme Allied Commander Transformation at NATO, also the ex-Chief of Staff of the French Air Force, Jean-Paul Palomero. He caught up with Monocle's contributing editor Andrew Muller about how governments can limit the threat of cyber attacks. Andrew began by asking the General if he sees much scope for international cooperation in the field.
A lot of people like me and many others think that cyber space is a common for good, but we have to fight because it could become the worst if we don't tackle that together. Then we will face a lot of problem in developing the digital transformation, even the digital revolutions, which could bring a lot of good effects on the society, on the climate change, on the ability to connect, to produce more connectivity through the world, getting the people closer and closer. So yes, of course, some countries will not accept that. Some organizations will not accept that. The cybercrime is there, and we must fight together against the cybercrime. Has no limits, has no border. We want to make sure that we tackle that. It's for the youth as well, for the children, and for for the benefit of the whole societies.
I mean, do you think any of there are some global treaties, global conventions that we have pertaining to things like space, the law of the sea, Antarctica, even perhaps. Do any of those strike you as possible steps along the way to some sort of global cybersecurity accord whereby everybody can agree that we may not be on the same team, but we're at least playing by the same rules?
Oh, interesting enough, there was just a kind of a partnership, a great partnership which has been signed between this forum, the Global Cybersecurity Forum, and the United Nations. And the Secretary General of the United Nations spoke to us, and this is really a good way forward. We need to introduce that at the Security Council. I advocated in the past to build together a cyber security council for the world, perhaps with different power, not the 5 which are in charge today, but to give the floor, I would say, and some influence for other countries as well, or group of countries. But it should be tackled at this level. You're right.
I mean, I know one of the points that has been made by this conference and one of the panels that you sat on is that so far, at least, spending on cybersecurity is a tiny, meagre fraction of what is spent on more conventional defence. But how hard is it to persuade governments that they need to spend more, especially when it's something you can't really see? If you spend a lot of money on physical defence, you get armies, you get warships, you get mirages like the ones you used to fly. There's something tangible there. Is it hard to get governments excited about spending like enormous sums of money on something their voters will never see?
Well, the voters will never see, but they will feel it and they will see the effects. Look, very recently, major airports closed because of cyber attacks. And every day we have new and more important cyber attacks. So the society will lose trust and confidence in cyber at large, in the cyberspace, digital transformation, if we are not able to tackle that. And it becomes a real political question. So this is how, unfortunately, we will get to this level of decision because of the nature of the cyber threats, and seeing the cyber crime prospering is not acceptable, neither for the citizen nor for the political. So because we see the effect, and they are really major on the society. Airport is the latest example, but there are big companies which are, and especially in the UK, which has been really struck by that, and they have a lot of difficulty to recover. Once your reputation is jeopardized, when the people don't trust you anymore. And so suddenly you see a big company which is losing its market because the trust is no longer there. So yes, we need to raise the knowledge of the society, not overdoing that because that could ruin the benefit of digital transformation, but really addressing the security on the hospital, for instance, the health service, the security in the airport, the stations, the transport at large. So in every domain, we have to improve, because if we don't do that, we will have a major disruption in our life.
I mean, does it strike you, just finally, from the conversations that you've been having in Riyadh, that any one country in particular is being regarded as the standard so far? Is there one country or perhaps group of countries that everybody is looking at and thinking they are making the running here? Not
any country is really above the other, but perhaps coming from my NATO experience, one country like Estonia is regarded as highly capable. And why is this the case? Because Estonia suffered a major attack against its critical infrastructure in 2007. They could have stopped their digital transformation, but they didn't. They carry on. They had a great resilience, and they have learned, and they have developed a full digitalized state. And this is a nice example. And by the way, they built as well a center of excellence for cyber, open to partners, to NATO, This is perhaps the best example I have in mind today.
Jean-Paul Palomero, former Supreme Allied Commander, Transformation of NATO, in conversation there with Monocle's Andrew Muller. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. And finally, on today's show, independent bookshops here in the UK are now able to sell ebooks for the very first time. This month, they can join bookshop.org's platform, which marks its 5th anniversary by opening up the fast-growing ebook market. Shops will keep all the profits from sales, giving them a rare chance to compete with Amazon. Monocle's Deputy Head of Radio, Tom Webb, spoke to bookshop.org's UK Managing Director, Nicole Vanderbilt, and he began by asking why this change matters so much to independent bookshops.
Our mission is to support indie bookshops in the age of e-commerce, and what we're trying to do is help them get access to parts of the book trade that historically have been difficult for them to do on their own. So when we launched 5 years ago, that was about offering an world-class e-commerce experience. And today we launch the ability for them to sell ebooks to their customers. And what's interesting about this is while ebooks have not taken over the book market, books have not gone the way of music, and publishers and booksellers deserve loads of credit for continuing to make the physical book a very covetable object that people are still buying. Ebooks do play a big role in a modern reader's life. There's a recent YouGov study that showed that 40% of readers have read an ebook in the last 12 months, and 25% of them tell us it's the main way that they read. So this is quite a big part of the market. It's quite a big part of a reader's life that indie bookshops just have not been able to help their customers with or have access to as an income stream.
And why haven't they been able to? What are the barriers for independent bookshops into the ebook market?
Yeah, that's a really good question because we have been working very hard ourselves to get this ready. Some of that is because in the ebook market, the publishers have very understandably strict and significant requirements around digital rights management. So it is not trivial to be able to put up an ebook and sell it to somebody online. It takes quite a lot of engineering work to do that. And so even more so than offering online sales, this is something that indie bookshops have struggled to have the resource or expertise or time or funding to build themselves. And so even some of the biggest, most successful bookshops in the UK are really excited to to use our ebook platform to get access to this market.
Now, you've mentioned how difficult it is, how expensive it is. How have you been able to not only deliver it, but also compete on a par with the giant that is Amazon?
It's a good question because we are still a tiny but mighty and very committed team. We are, by the looks of it, a tech startup, but we have not taken venture capital funding. We have written into our bylaws that we cannot be sold to Amazon. So we are sort of a different beast than most tech startups. And so I would say part of the way that we've competed with Amazon is by not playing by their game. When we launched 5 years ago, I think a lot of people thought we were slightly insane to try to compete with Amazon in selling books because for better or for worse, they've taught consumers to expect things very fast and very cheap at all costs. But what we've found with physical books, we're happy to say, is that people are willing to pay that little bit more in the interest of supporting their indie bookshops.
Now, you mentioned it's been 5 years since you launched. Has it been a success? How have you managed to change the market at all? Yeah,
make no mistake, we are still small compared to Amazon, but we have generated £4.5 million in profit for the indie bookshops in the UK in that time. And that is significant money to these small businesses. The good news is it doesn't take a huge amount to make a big difference to these high street retailers. And so we're very proud of that accomplishment.
And where next for you? Are you looking into audio and podcasts? What market is exciting you?
Yes. So we will launch audiobooks in the spring of next year. We kind of can't get there fast enough. It's been the number one request from the UK bookshops since we launched. It's a very exciting and dynamic market. If you compare the quality and creativity that went into an audiobook 20 years ago with what you can get on the market today, it is astounding, the difference in what has happened in that time. And certainly Spotify entering that market, I think, has continued to create more listeners and more investment from publishers. So you will definitely see us do that in the spring of next year.
Exciting. And finally, what would be a marker of success for you?
We always hold the bookshops front and center in everything that we do. So I would say, number one, the bookshops feeling supported and excited and able to go out and sell ebooks confidently. And obviously, we would love to see lots of sales.
Nicole Vanderbilt of bookshop.org there in conversation with Monocle's Tom Webb. Thank you for that. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Laura Kramer, our researcher was Daniela Braw-Smith, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back on Monday at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Have a great weekend, everyone, and thanks for listening.